It's a well-known fact that Sir Winston Churchill loved to indulge in fine drink throughout the day, and his favorite champagne was Pol Roger. So to elevate Harlaxton Manor's Churchill Week events, Pol Roger was the sponsored wine of choice for guests. Harlaxton Manor is an exceptional manor house in Lincolnshire, England, that hosts extravagant weddings and events all year round, alongside a permanent American study abroad college. For the events commemorating the sesquicentennial of Sir Winston Churchill's birth, the manor hosted a special exhibition of Churchill memorabilia, for which I have a separate video tour linked in the description. But in addition to that, Pol Roger provides some excellent interpretive placards about the company's history and close connections to Churchill and Britain. They were set up in the beautiful, appropriate French Rococo-inspired gold room of the manor, where guests could also purchase champagne to enjoy while going through the activities around the manor's staterooms. So let's take a journey through Pol Roger history here in this room that looks like it could be in some chateau in Champagne. Pol Roger the man was born in 1831 into a family with a wine-producing heritage. His mother owned about 40 hectares of vineyards, about half of what the house owns today. Pol started as a wine merchant around the age of 18, and over the next 51 years established his house as one of the finest in Épernay. He died just before his 69th birthday in 1900. 175 years later, Pol Roger remains a family-owned enterprise and one of the best-selling champagnes in Champagne. So in 1900, his two sons Georges and Maurice took over the business. However, 65 days later, calamity struck. A large section of their cellar collapsed, wasting 28,000 gallons of wine on the floor. That's about 500 casks and 1.5 million bottles. However, other champagne houses actually helped them out and allowed them to borrow their cellars and resources, and the free publicity from the collapse turned out to be a blessing in disguise. By 1914, things were going swimmingly for them, and they had royal patrons in Britain, Belgium, and Spain. But with the outbreak of the Great War, Georges was called to serve on the front line, while Maurice, who was then the mayor of Épernay, stayed in the town. Of course, the front line was right near them in the Marne, so the 1914 harvest was, quote, harvested to the sound of gun and drunk to the sound of trumpets. Mayor Maurice Roger successfully dealt with the crisis over the years, and often sheltered townsfolk in his cellars from German shelling. At the outbreak of the Second World War, the British were using Pol Roger's offices until the oncoming German invasion forced them to flee, and the préfet was evacuated. Georges and Maurice returned to their occupied hometown in 1940 to find the Germans had pilfered their supply. They decided to block up their most valuable cellars and went on with their lives as they could, sometimes sheltering resistance members in their cellars. Épernay was liberated by Patton's Third Army in 1944, and those Americans were welcomed by residents with bottles of Pol Roger. Pol Roger has long been a favorite wine across the channel here in Britain. Pol Roger began to produce champagne in a dry style that was less alcoholic and less sweet, which English consumers preferred. The 1874 vintage became a drink of choice amongst London's exclusive clubs, and it was the first to be bottled pint size. That's also the year baby Winston Churchill was born. Pol Roger was soon awarded a royal warrant from Queen Victoria in 1877, so it may not be a surprise that it became Sir Winston Churchill's favorite champagne. He was a lifelong devotee of the house, and very frequently had it flowing through his bloodstream. Winston Churchill is first known to have become a regular customer in 1908, when he was president of the Board of Trade. He maintained a direct line to the Pol Roger office in Épernay to order the champagne. He loved it so much that he named his racehorse Pol Roger, and the horse did win at Kempton Park in 1953. Churchill first met Odette Roger, the third-generation owner, at a lunch in recently liberated Paris in November of 1944. Here's his itinerary from that day. He had the Louvre specially opened for him, then had lunch with Odette and other guests at the British Embassy. They became good friends after this first meeting, and Odette would send him a case of vintage Pol Roger for each of his birthdays. She also attended his funeral in 1964. During Churchill's premierships, Pol Roger was often served at state banquets, and was a staple at 10 Downing Street. Churchill hosted the Queen at Downing Street on his last evening as Prime Minister in 1955 before he resigned, and served her Pol Roger. He had a habit of keeping mementos about such banquets and sending them to Odette Roger. The British cartoonist Michael Heath also maintained a relationship with Pol Roger, and made numerous humorous cartoons promoting the brand. As mentioned, Pol Roger received its first royal warrant to be purveyors of champagne to the royal households for Queen Victoria. Further warrants were awarded by King George V in 1912, King George VI in 1947, and most recently Queen Elizabeth II. Pol Roger was served at the state banquet for Elizabeth's coronation in 1953. Pol Roger goes hand in hand with sport. It's been prominently served in recent times at eventing equestrian triathlons, rugby union competitions, and real tennis, known as the Game of Kings. This placard talks about how Pol Roger has frequently made it into British newspaper headlines, from the 1900 cellar collapse, to Pol Roger refusing to make smaller pint sizes for the Tories in recent years. The House of Pol Roger has been selling wine for over 175 years now, and has a fascinating history with many British connections. It has survived all the turmoil and wars over the years, as it remains fiercely independent and a mainstay of the great winemaking tradition of Champagne. So this was a great opportunity to learn about the House of Pol Roger. It served as an excellent complement to the exhibition and events held here at Harlaxton Manor. A grand merci to Pol Roger for supplying these placards and of course the champagne. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then please check out my other videos on Harlaxton Manor, including the Churchill exhibition, 1940s weekend events, and my history tour of the absolutely brilliant manor house where this was all hosted. Also take a look at my other content featuring historic places, museums, and much more around Britain, France, America, and elsewhere. Please like the video, share it, and subscribe to my channel as well. Thanks for watching!